Inside a frozen tomb deep in the Siberian steppe, archaeologists did not find the crude weapons of primitive nomads, but a microscopic golden bow case containing a weapon so engineered it required the integration of 4 distinct biological materials cured over a decade. Everything we were taught about the ancient world's most feared horse archers was wrong. These were not savage, illiterate wanderers of the wasteland. They were the masters of an ultra-high-tech military-industrial complex that ancient Greece could only watch in terror. Today, we are dismantling the myth of the mindless barbarian by stepping directly into the soil of these royal kurgans to decode the physics of their legendary composite bow. For thousands of years, our understanding of the Scythians was written entirely by their enemies. The Greek historian Herodotus painted a picture of absolute terror, describing nomads who drank the blood of their first slain foes, used human scalps as napkins, and gilded the skulls of their enemies to use as ceremonial drinking cups. To the settled civilizations of the Mediterranean, the vast Eurasian steppe was a dark, lawless void populated by centaur-like beasts who knew nothing of art, science, or order. This terrifying image created a cultural blind spot that lasted for over 2,000 years, keeping the true nature of Scythian society locked away in the frozen earth. They were wrong. The breakthrough began in the mid-20th century when archaeologists started excavating the kurgans, massive earthen and stone burial mounds that rise like small mountains across the grasslands of modern-day Russia, Kazakhstan, and Ukraine. In the high Altai Mountains, at a site known as Pazyryk, researchers struck a layer of ancient permafrost that had acted as a giant natural refrigerator for over 2,000 years. When they breached the timber burial chambers, they did not find decayed skeletons. They found perfectly preserved history. The water that had seeped into the tombs shortly after their construction had frozen solid, locking the contents in ice and preserving organic materials that normally vanish within decades. Archaeologists gasped as they melted the ice to reveal exquisite felt carpets, delicate Chinese silks, elaborate wooden chariots, and the bodies of Scythian nobles, their skins still intact and decorated with incredibly complex flowing tattoos of mythical beasts. But it was the weapons buried beside them that truly began to rewrite history. How does an illiterate society out-engineer the greatest empires of the Mediterranean? To find the answer, we have to look closely at the physics of their legendary composite bow, a weapon that was the ancient equivalent of an intercontinental ballistic missile. A standard wooden bow, known as a self-bow, is limited by the physical properties of a single piece of timber. If you pull it back too far, the wood fibers on the outside stretch and snap, while the fibers on the inside compress and lose their elasticity. The Scythians bypassed these physical limitations entirely through an astonishing understanding of material science, constructing a weapon made from a complex sandwich of highly specialized organic components. The core of the Scythian bow was made of flexible wood, usually birch or mountain maple, which acted as a shear-resistant spacer. On the belly of the bow, the side facing the archer, they glued thick strips of horn, typically harvested from the Siberian ibex. Horn is an incredible natural material under compression. It can be squeezed to a fraction of its size and will violently snap back to its original shape. On the back of the bow, the side facing the target, they layered shredded animal sinew, taken from the legs of wild deer or bulls. Sinew has a tensile strength that rivals modern carbon fiber, allowing it to stretch to immense lengths without tearing. To bind these materials together, Scythian bowyers used an adhesive that was itself a chemical masterpiece, fish glue, boiled down from the swim bladders of giant sturgeon caught in the Caspian and Black Seas. This glue was incredibly strong, highly flexible, and completely waterproof, allowing the bow to survive the extreme temperature fluctuations of the steppe, from scorching summers to sub-zero winters. But the real magic was in the shape. When unstrung, the Scythian bow did not look like a bow at all. It curved completely backward into a tight circle or a deep C shape. To string it required immense strength and technique, often requiring 2 people using their entire body weight to bend the weapon back against its natural curve. This meant that even before the archer began to draw the string, the bow was already holding an incredible amount of stored potential energy. When the archer finally pulled the string, the tips of the bow, known as siyas, acted as stiff levers. It was a mechanical cheat code. These levers reduced the effort needed to hold the bow at full draw, allowing the horse archer to aim with absolute precision while maximizing the velocity of the arrow upon release. The result was a weapon with a draw weight of over 100 pounds, capable of launching armor-piercing arrows at speeds that could penetrate Greek bronze plate armor from distances of over 500 yards. The steppe was not a barren void. It was an ancient Silicon Valley of military design. The arrows themselves were engineered with the same obsessive attention to detail. Scythians did not use simple wooden sticks. They used lightweight shafts made of reed or birch, tipped with sophisticated trilobate bronze arrowheads. These three-bladed tips were aerodynamically cast to spin in flight, stabilizing the arrow over long distances and carving wide, devastating wounds through armor. A single warrior carried up to 80 of these deadly projectiles in a specialized leather case called a goritos, which held both the bow and the ammunition in a single compact, waterproof unit. This allowed them to unleash a continuous, rapid-fire hail of arrows while riding at full gallop, steering their horses using only their knees. But the bow was only one part of the revelation. The level of wealth and metallurgical sophistication discovered in these tombs has completely shattered our understanding of ancient nomadic economies. For generations, historians assumed that because the Scythians did not build permanent cities of stone, they had no complex industry. But the excavation of the Arzen II kurgan in the remote Tuva Republic of Siberia turned this theory upside down. Inside a burial chamber that had remained untouched by grave robbers for 25 centuries, archaeologists uncovered a royal couple buried with over 9,000 individual gold objects. These were not crude, melted lumps of metal traded from other civilizations. These were exquisite, locally produced masterworks of what art historians call the animal style. The royal garments were covered in thousands of tiny golden panthers, each less than 2 centimeters long, cast with such precision that every muscle and claw of the predator was visible. The gold was of incredibly high purity, often exceeding 99%, and was worked using techniques like microscopic filigree and colloidal hard soldering. This soldering technique is mind-blowing. It involves using a chemical reaction with copper salts to fuse microscopic gold beads onto a gold surface at a temperature just below the melting point of gold itself. To do this, an artisan had to maintain a constant, precise temperature over an open charcoal fire, regulating the heat using a hollow blowpipe and their own breath. A single degree too hot, and the entire masterpiece would melt into a worthless puddle. This requires a level of highly specialized, professional craftsmanship that simply cannot exist in a society of disorganized, primitive wanderers. It requires permanent workshops, stable trade routes to secure high-quality gold, and a highly structured social hierarchy capable of supporting a class of master artisans. How do we reconcile this with their nomadic lifestyle? The truth is that the Scythians were not random wanderers. They were seasonal migrators who followed highly organized, calculated routes across the steppe to manage their massive herds of horses and livestock. They had fortified winter settlements along major river valleys, which served as centers for metallurgy, pottery, and international trade. They were the original gatekeepers of the Silk Road. Long before the Roman Empire or the Han Dynasty established formal trade networks, the Scythians were acting as the vital connective tissue of the ancient world. Through their hands passed silk from China, glass from the Mediterranean, carpets from Persia, and gold from the Altai Mountains. They did not just raid civilizations, they facilitated the exchange of technology, culture, and ideas across thousands of miles of wilderness. This mobility was their ultimate defense. When the Persian Emperor Darius the Great, ruler of the largest empire the world had ever seen, marched an army of over 700,000 soldiers into Scythian territory to crush them, he expected a conventional war. He expected to lay siege to cities and force a decisive battle. Instead, the Scythians simply vanished. They retreated deeper into the endless horizon of the steppe, systematically burning the grasslands behind them and poisoning the water wells. Whenever the exhausted, starving Persian columns halted to rest, Scythian horse archers would suddenly materialize from the dust, unleash a devastating volley of armor-piercing arrows from their composite bows, and disappear before the Persian infantry could even draw their weapons. When Darius sent a messenger to the Scythian king demanding that he either stand and fight or submit, the king, Idanthyrsus, sent back a response that defines the very essence of nomadic power. He wrote that the Scythians had no cities or cultivated fields to defend, so they had no reason to fight. But if the Persians wanted to see them fight, they should find the graves of their ancestors and try to destroy them. Only then would the Persians realize how Scythians fight. Darius, realizing his massive army was being slowly starved and picked apart by an invisible enemy, was forced to retreat in complete humiliation, abandoning his sick and wounded as he fled back across the Danube. The world's greatest superpower had been brought to its knees not by a larger army, but by superior mobility, geography, and weapon engineering. This forces us to confront a profound realization. We have been conditioned to define civilization by what we can see from the road: stone walls, monumental temples, and written archives. But the Scythians proved that a society can be highly advanced, technologically sophisticated, and artistically brilliant without being chained to a single plot of land. Their monuments were built not of stone, but of organic science, metallurgy, and movement. The barbarian label was nothing more than ancient war propaganda, written by those who lived in fear behind stone walls, unable to comprehend a power that could not be conquered or contained. When you look out across the vast Eurasian steppe today, you are not looking at a historic vacuum. You are looking at the cradle of a brilliant, mobile empire that mastered the laws of nature and weapon physics long before the rest of the world caught up. The archives of the ancient world are still whispering, and the deeper we dig into the frozen soil of the past, the more we find that the foundations of our own modern technology were laid by those we once dismissed as primitive. We have only just begun to scratch the surface of what actually happened.